Good evening. It's 1991, and the month is January. This 23-year-old rookie is fresh out of the academy. He's trained up, and he's ready to make a difference in Arizona. On his uniform is a badge, a radio, a can of pepper spray, and a revolver. Now, I know I have a lot of young people in this crowd, so I'm going to help you out. That's a revolver. All right, it was the weapon of the time, and we've since moved on from that one. But nonetheless, with the revolver on my hip, I head out to my squad car. I get in. In there is a radio, a switch for my red and blues up above, and this briefcase right here. In that briefcase is everything I need, both gear and equipment, to do the job of a police officer in 1991. Expectations of the public were rather simple at the time. Come when called, deal with the bad guys, put the real bad ones in jail, and simply make it easy for us to sleep at night so we don't have to worry. I begin my career, and only months later, Rodney King occurs. We all know the situation. It's California, LAPD runs into Mr. Rodney King. He's in a stolen vehicle and he's high on drugs. The tactics used that day to take him into custody were both ineffective and rather extreme, as we all know. What was unique about this situation as well was it was captured on videotape to be viewed, criticized, and analyzed by the public and the world. We in law enforcement at that day had to change things. We had to make sure that the equipment that we used was more effective, the tactics that we used were more appropriate, and we simply had to change the way things were done. Also, what was different that day was the fact that we had citizens armed with video cameras, ready to go to film our every move, in a sense to hold us accountable. Public expectation was that we were to do the right thing at all times. They were ready to make sure that we were. Let's face it, they're our bosses. We're supposed to rise to their expectations. So we had to change that day. With that came more training, more gear, and more equipment. Guess where that went? Right into the briefcase. Fast forward to 1995. We had a U.S. citizen rent a box truck, fill it full of fertilizer, and park it in front of the federal building in Oklahoma City. The explosion that happened killed over 100 people and injured hundreds more. Immediately, the public looked to us and said, "Protect us." Introducing the term domestic terrorism, something we had never faced before. A new job, something that we were responsible for. We started to look at public gatherings, public places, even the buildings. What was vulnerable? How could we protect our public, the innocent people that were injured and killed that day? How can we keep that from happening again? We evaluated ourselves, and again, our job grew. More equipment, more gear, more training. Into that briefcase it goes. 1997, back in California. The police were called to a run-of-the-mill, quote-unquote, bank robbery at the Bank of America in North Hollywood. Officers responding that day had no idea what they're about to encounter. The typical situation ends in the fact that they get there, the bad guys have left in their getaway car, detectives respond, and they solve the crime later on. Unfortunately, in this situation, our suspects were ready to do something different. They were armed with fully automatic rifles. They had body armor on them, and they were ready to do battle with the police that were responding that day. In 1997, the average police officer simply held a handgun. Now, we had graduated to the semi-auto, but we simply had a handgun on our hip, and some of us even had shotguns, but that was about it. So as you can tell, we were not ready to deal with these individuals that we encountered. The situation took almost an hour, and that was to essentially allow for the SWAT team to arrive, and for some of the most innovative officers I've ever run into, they went to a local gun store and obtained some automatic rifles to kind of match them. And luckily the situation was brought to an end, and it was neutralized. We were outgunned, and it was a harsh reality for us as police officers. We needed to do something to prepare ourselves with the bad guys that were now armed much higher than we were. The introduction of the urban police rifle came about pretty much on that day. I'll never forget watching that on television myself. More equipment. We had to do better tactics. How do we deal with that? We have to be ready for the bad guys to be doing battle. They're not running from us anymore, they're coming at us. Better tactics, more equipment, better gear, into that briefcase, except for the rifle, of course. The rifle wouldn't fit. That went in the car. 1999, Columbine, Colorado. That day started like every other day at Columbine High School, except it didn't end the same. 2 students came to school armed with firearms with an intent to do harm to the students and the faculty of the school. They also came with explosives set in the parking lots and different points of the building to take out the responding police officers as well. This was a different situation. We had never dealt with something like this. And the training and the tactics that were told to us at that point was to contain the suspect, get to the area, set up a perimeter, and let's wait for SWAT. Because guess what? SWAT has all the tools that are needed. We had our urban police rifles at that point, but that's about all we had. We had really no training of going after a bad guy in this type of situation. The introduction of the term the active shooter came about at this point. Officers waiting for SWAT to arrive were hearing the shots going off in the building, and they simply couldn't wait anymore. So they formed up an ad hoc team, went into the building, and luckily cornered the suspects, and we know the end result is that they took their own lives. So luckily no one else was hurt past the time that they took the initiative to move in. Again, we had to change what we were doing. The public's expectation was that schools should be safe. What are we doing here? Why are we sitting around waiting when someone's inside doing damage? So we took it upon ourselves to protect them from that, because again, the public expected that of us. More training, more gear, a lot more gear, I'll tell you at this point. That briefcase, it's getting kind of full, isn't it? The last incident I'm going to speak of that's occurred during my tenure as a police officer, and we all know this one was 9/11. New York City was attacked by the threat that we always feared would come, and it finally did, and that was foreign terrorists coming into our soil to attack us. This situation stretched our resources to the very end. And I'm not just talking to New York City, this was nationwide. We were responding to help them in the city. We also immediately were tasked with identifying possible targets that day and the very next day. Where were they going to hit next? We all know kind of the panic that went across nationwide on that one, and it was the expectation was that local law enforcement was going to take care of us. Again, more training. We had to start identifying suspects that were within our community that might be trying to do us harm. And that was a difficult situation, a difficult task, if you will. More training, more tactics, more gear, into the suitcase it went. These events and many more that happened over the last 20 years has changed the way law enforcement operates, has changed the way that we do our job. It has simply changed. That briefcase that I have right here has become obsolete. It cannot hold the things that I need to do the job here in the year 2017. Sometime along the way, I had to graduate to something like this. This double extra large reinforced duffel bag that carried all the gear now that I had to put in my car, along with my rifle, my shotgun, all the different weapons that were out there. I mentioned change. Being a supervisor in law enforcement, there's an adage that we use, and it pretty much goes across nationwide. There are 2 things that cops hate. Cops hate the way things are, and they hate change. So we're in a bad situation, aren't we? What are we going to do? But little did the officers know that working around us, we have changed. We had to change. We had to move things around. We had to take on the new jobs at task. We changed in many ways. We went from writing reports by hand on a piece of paper using whiteout. And again, young students, if you don't know whiteout, look it up on your, all right, we used whiteout. And we transferred to typing them on computers that are in our cars. So remotely, we're typing these reports now. Who'd ever thought that that would happen? I mentioned it earlier, we went from the revolvers on our hips to the semi-automatic handguns, and we also went to automatic weapons that we strapped across our chest in the form of the urban patrol rifle. So that's changed. We have cell phones now. Didn't have them back then. We have GPS locators on our vehicles. We also have cameras, not just in our cars, but on our person. We're walking around with cameras on our person. Smile, all right? We're filming you. Technology has allowed us to also take a step further in policing. We've gone from the simple task of responding when crime occurs and trying to deal with it afterwards to trying to get ahead of crime. We can take mathematics, analytics, we can take our crime numbers, our crime histories, crime trends from the past, and we can attempt to predict crime before it happens, whether it be on holidays, whether it be in certain areas of town, different times of day. We have put forth the task to take care of that. It's what's known as predictive policing, if you've ever heard that before. So that's something that we've tried to do. There's also technology available to us for our school resource officers. They now have the ability to monitor social posts as they come up live from the students in their schools currently. And that isn't to invade their privacy. That's not what we're trying to do. But as what happened in Columbine High School, we're making an attempt to try to get out in front of those crimes. Any type of threat that's going to come to the school, that's what we're going to do. We also may be able to try to intervene if we feel that there's a student in distress. Their posts, their blogs are going to tell us that maybe they might be hurting and need some type of help. So we have changed. The job of police officers has changed as well, because we talked about public expectations. And what the public has asked us to do now is not simply catch the bad guys, put them in jail, make the area safe. We've become child counselors, we've become mediators in domestic disputes, we've become suicide preventers. We've become sometimes the first responders with a mentally ill subject out in public that is having some type of an episode and trying to help them out. We've also become number crunchers. I didn't get into this job to try to crunch numbers, but I found myself in that position to do that to this day. And then also we find ourselves on the corner or on the side of the road being a car mechanic in an attempt to try to help people out. I've discussed change, and change that has gone over the past 20 plus years that I've been involved in law enforcement. And we say that officers don't like that. And I've also mentioned my suitcase on my duffel bag. That simply isn't just a reality, but it's also a metaphor. It's a metaphor in the fact that I'm addressing a crowd here that has quite a few college students in it. And I'll take this parallel into your life. You're about to graduate, soon to graduate, a year or two, and whether it's going on to a profession or going on to more studies or just life in general, change is going to happen. I'm here to tell you. You probably have a briefcase ready, something that you think right now can tackle your tasks at hand and what you can do. But remember, change is going to happen. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. It's an important thing that you must understand is going to happen. I, as an old, worn-out police officer here, would like to task you with the fact of identify that change, embrace it, have fun with it, but be ready for it. Be ready to graduate to that large duffel bag. That briefcase isn't going to do you any good. If you don't, you will find yourself left with that briefcase and left behind. I'd like to close with this. It's 2017, it's January, and it's time for this seasoned veteran, this old worn-out gray-haired guy, to hang up his belt and retire, and that's what I'm going to do. It's time for me to hand it off to the next 23-year-old young Ricky, ready to make a difference, and the only thing I can tell him is keep your head on a swivel and be ready for the change. I thank you for your time.